Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the South Planning Committee. I am David Evans, Chair of this committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed, so members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. Should any committee member experience technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact the designated IT officer on the number they have already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute their microphone unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function if you indicate the desire to speak, but nothing else, so that I can be clear who is asking to speak and the debate has to be heard by those listening by audio feed. Members are asked to ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on an item of you have not heard all the debate. As chairman, I interpret the council's existing standing orders in the light of the requirement of remote participation and advice from the monitoring officer prior to making the ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosure of pecuniary interest. I will ask everyone to speak during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so those listening know who is speaking. Chair members are reminded to disclose pecuniary interest in any matter to be discussed which is not included in the register of interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their camera and muting the microphone prior to the matter being discussed. David Evans to read each member's name and ask them to confirm presence and confirm their interest. I start with myself, David Evans, Chairman of this committee and Councillor for Churchland and Craven Arms. I have no pecuniary interest. David Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Turner, Member for Much Wenlock. I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Andy Boddington.
Andy Boddington for Ludlow North. No interests.
Thank you. Simon Harris.
Simon Harris, Ward Member for Broseley. Slight issue that I worked for Solop Sand and Gravel for a number of years and I know exactly how it operates out of Condover.
Thank you. Nick Hignett.
Councillor Nick Hignett, Ray Valley Ward, no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Richard Huffer. Richard Huffer. Yep. Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corvedale Division, no pecuniary interest, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tony Parsons from Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton, no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Tyndall.
Councillor Robert Tyndall, present from Brown Clee Division. I have no pecuniary interests to declare.
Councillor Mad Shinton.
Councillor Mad Shinton, Clibby Mortimer Division. I have no pecuniary interest.
Councillor Tina Woodward.
Councillor Tina Woodward, Alveley and Claverley Division, no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. David Evans, please can the officers confirm their presence? The planning solicitor, please. Planning solicitor.
Good afternoon, Chair. Idris Iqbal, solicitor.
Thank you. And councillor committee officers, planning officers, please.
Yes, sir. Richard Fortune, principal planner.
Graham French, principal planner.
Thank you. Have we any other officers in the meeting? Yeah, thank you.
Mark Wootton, highways.
Thank you, Mark. Chair, can the committee officers confirm any apologies, please?
I've received no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. To confirm the meeting of the South Planning Committee, the minutes meeting held on the 16th of February. As chairman, I move the minutes of the previous South Planning Committee meeting held on the 16th of February as circulated with the agenda papers be signed as correct. Can I have a seconder for the minutes, please?
Yes, Chairman, I'm prepared to second them. David Turner.
Thank you for that. Chair David Evans, I will now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. Public questions. Are there any public questions, please?
No public questions, Chair.
Thank you. We've done the pecuniary interest. Turning to substantive items, I will be inviting the planning officer to present them before dealing with the public speaking part of the meeting and ask for comments from members of the committee. Could I have Graham French, please, to do item number 5, which is Gonsall Quarry, Condover.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a southern extension to Gonsall Quarry, which will last for 4.5 years at a proposed rate of 150,000 tonnes per annum. Proposed that the output would increase from 50,000 to 100,000 tonnes upon payment of a highway maintenance lump sum, and will then increase to 150,000 if a proposed satellite depot at Norton Farm, also this agenda, is approved. Extraction and restoration would take place progressively, with restorations of a mix of agricultural and wildlife habitats. An environmental statement accompanies the application. The application site's located off the main roads through between Dorrington and Condover. It's a class 3 road, in fact, south of the existing quarry, and it comprises 23.2 hectares within the existing quarry and 5.1 hectares southern extension. Condover Parish Council have objected on the basis of concerns about HGV movements through the village principally. 75 local residents have also objected on highway safety and amenity grounds, and an objectors group, CRAG, Condover Residents Action Group, has further detailed these concerns. The 2 nearest residents have actually written in support. There are no objections from technical consultees, including the Environment Agency and the Council's Highways, Regulatory Services, Historic Environment, Ecology, Drainage and Trees teams. So the MPPF advises that great weight should be given to the benefits of mineral working, including to the economy, and states that applications shall only be refused on highway grounds where the residual impacts are severe. In this case, highway officers and other technical consultees have not objected, and the application puts forward mitigation measures to control quarry traffic, which includes a proposed satellite depot and a commitment to pay a £65,000 highway maintenance contribution upfront if permission is granted. Obviously, members will have noted the correspondence from the objectors, which details their concerns. Proposed extension is allocated for mineral working by SANDAV policy MD53. Development guidelines accompanying the policy indicate that any proposal should be linked to a new access to the A49 north of the quarry. However, the applicant has advised the current application is too small to bear the substantial cost of providing the new access. Additionally, Highways England has indicated to the applicant that there is an in-principle objection as traffic would increase on a minor junction to a trunk road. A larger area to the north of Gonsall Quarry is also allocated in the SAMDEV and may be able to support the cost of the new access. However, there's currently no indication that Highways England objection can be overcome. The SAMDEV development guidelines are a material consideration. That's the accompanying the policy, the requirement for a northerly access. And this sets out the expectations for an application to comply with. It is, however, guidance as opposed to a rigid precondition of policy. And it's for members to determine the weight which should be given to the expectation in the guidance that a new access should be delivered. Material considerations in this respect are the absence of objection from the Highway Authority and the advice on highway refusals in the NPPF. CRAG has expressed concerns that any approval of the current application might make it more likely that a subsequent application for a larger northern extension would be approved without the new access. The applicant has advised in this respect that if it becomes economic to develop the northern extension, then all highway matters would be reassessed against a presumption that quarry traffic should be directed away from Condover. CRAG has also raised a number of other detailed objections in a late representation, which has been further added to within the hour, members are referred to this, and the officer has responded to the initial CRAG objections, and that's in the additional representations report. Hasn't been possible to respond given the very short notice to the further representation, but I'm happy to respond to questions on that. The current permission for Gonsall Quarry, which was issued in 2017, restricts output to 50,000 tonnes per year, although historically the quarry has consistently produced at rates of between 150,000 and more. The current output restriction was imposed not for highway safety reasons, but because it was not anticipated that the specialist mineral, a fine sand, in the current mineral working area would be worked at a greater rate. However, resource problems at the applicant's other quarries have led to pressure to increase production at Gonsall in order to meet contractual demand. Additionally, Condover Quarry, which is to the north of Condover, has been closed for 18 months, which has also placed pressure on Gonsall as the only local supplier of sand and gravel. Before that time, it was really treading water, producing a lot below its normal output levels. Working above the permitted rate is not condoned. The current application seeks, however, to regularise this situation in accordance with historic production levels. So finally, in terms of other issues, including ecology, hydrology, agriculture, trees and amenity, the environmental statement concludes that the proposals are policy compliant. The absence of objection from technical consultees supports this conclusion. In fact, the ecologists have acknowledged the habitat benefits of the restoration scheme. Detailed planning conditions have been recommended in Appendix 1 and would be supported by a legal agreement reinforcing existing routing restriction and securing the highway maintenance contribution. Subject to this, its recommended permission can be granted. There is one issue that has been raised, particularly in the later Crag representation, which was received within the last hour, and that is that the authority should have notified Highways England of the current planning application. Officers would not accept that position. The current application represents a continuation of an output which has been produced at the quarry for 50 years plus. There is no material change to the level of highway output that has occurred. In actual fact, although the 50,000 tonne limit was imposed in 2017, and there is an enforcement case sort of potentially looming regarding the increase in outputs that has occurred since then, the actual levels have remained fairly consistent at 150,000 tonnes or thereabouts, more or less continuously over the last five-year period. There is no material change in the actual extent of quarry traffic relative to what has previously been permitted and historic norms. As such, there is no material change at the A49 junction. Had the Highway Authority response referred to this as an issue, then certainly we would have consulted Highways England, but that was not the case, and the Highway Authority is not objecting. Thank you, Chair. That's all I want to say on this one at the moment.
Thank you. David Evans, Chair. Any public speakers on this matter will have submitted written statements to be read in accordance with the revised procedure of public speaking. The local member may read their own or may be elected for the solicitor to read a statement. Can the solicitor read any statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. Idris Iqbal, solicitor. The first statement is from a Mr. and Mrs. Regan, local residents, and it reads, "It's hard to put in words how the quarry affects our daily life and mental health. We work and live at home. Even though this quarry is bound to work to times of operation and volume, it is clear that owners have a total disregard for these boundaries. The lorries thunder through our very small village from as early as 5:30 AM. The lorries shake the structure of our home. This is not just the noise of the metal bodies of the lorries, but the physical movement of our home. This continues through the day and most Saturdays. Only having a Sunday where you are not woken by the metal giants that shake our house is totally unacceptable and is taking a toll of our well-being. They take over our footpaths, destroy the road. We call it lorry valet. While they often struggle to pass the lorries that supply the industrial estate, village buses and farm vehicles. This village is not an appropriate thoroughfare for a quarry, which has been documented in a report. We have witnessed a motorbike being reversed into by a lorry, tried to pass another lorry, both quarry vehicles. Once JCA opens again, we will then also have the large coaches of school children going through the same small road. The weigh station will increase more lorries through our village, for the apparently smaller loads, just more of them. The vehicle size suggested for this is the same as what is already thundering through the village. In light of the evidence we've been putting up with an illegal volume of tonnage removed from this quarry, proceedings should be started by the council, who have a duty toward us not to allow the applicant to continue to operate a business. He cannot be trusted and clearly does not take the villagers seriously or care. The only way this quarry should be given any consideration for planning is on the basis he has direct access to the A49, based on a true assessment of how many years are left in the quarry, so we do not hear any more lies about small applications that do not warrant this access cost. The small extension applications are deliberate, so you can avoid the access cost to service the quarry for the true amount of years left at the site. This quarry, with the vehicles that use a conservation area as access less than a metre from some homes, is breaking our villagers. The quarry should be paused. Review the fact planning has been broken in a monumental way and has an irresponsible owner. The second statement from Condover Parish Council, and it reads, Condover Parish Council objects to this application as follows. Anger, frustration and real concerns have been felt right across our community because of the noise, fumes, disruption and dangers caused by the heavy traffic. To continue to allow quarry vehicles to drive through this village after years of complaint and breach of the condition is completely unacceptable. Furthermore, Gonsall Quarry has significantly increased its activity, leading to an intolerable level of traffic through the village. This has gone unchallenged by the planning authority, and indeed any receipts for the quarrying that were meant to mitigate the cost of quarry traffic have not been secured. No action has been taken to repair road damage and no support has been given to residents. Condover Village can no longer cope with the level of quarry traffic. Whatever the mitigations, the fact is up to 60 quarry lorries per day will pass through Condover Village. No villagers could or should be expected to walk their children to school, go to the post office or carry out daily life dodging a stream of 20 or 30 ton lorries. The mitigations would also fundamentally change the character of the conservation area at the heart of the village. There has been no oversight or transparency of the actual quarrying levels despite conditions applied for the last application, and therefore the lorries that are actually weighed, 150,000 tonnes, are the tip of the iceberg. For example, we know what gravel is brought to Gonsall Quarry from the quarry in Ludlow, which is unquantified in this planning application, and there is reference to transporting bark and salt, also unquantified. The parish council has been told by planning officers that the SAMDEV condition that any further expansion of Gonsall Quarry would require construction of a dedicated access route to the A49. Assume the northern and southern expansions would be concurrent. We find this disingenuous as we are unaware of any other quarry that is extended in two opposite directions at the same time. There are a number of alternative transport route options, but no data has been provided to justify the Condover route. Other than that, the other routes are more expensive. This surely is the price everyone pays for any application, and it is not for the authority to enter into a convenient arrangement with applicant to enable their solution. For example, one alternative concerns an eastern route via Berrywood, Cantlop and Weeping Cross, using existing roads already used by Condover Industrial Estate, heavy goods traffic and large agricultural vehicles. A second route is to construct a western route direct to the A49. Detailed, publicly available assessments of both these routes have never been provided, including traffic volumes, road conditions and costs. Significant issues exist where there is community indifference or a lack of enforcement policies, and this can lead to serious implications and repercussions for all parties. These apparently deceitful activities by the applicant have been going on for at least 5 years, and no plausible reason has been provided for the lack of information, lack of data, and the disingenuous communications by the quarry company in particular. The local community is absolutely against the application, and approval of the application will only lead to more disquiet about the behaviour of all parties concerned. The next statement's from Councillor Dan Morris, the local member chair, and I have indication that Councillor Morris would like to read his own.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. If you want to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dan Morris, Shropshire Council member for the ward of Burnell. I am not opposed to Gonsall Quarry, but I am opposed to this application because of the route it seeks to take. I urge the committee to overturn the officer decision on the following material planning grounds. 1. It is against SAMDEV policy MD5B, which provides guidelines to be followed, which include a new link road to the A49. These guidelines are a material planning consideration, point 6.6 in the report, and I urge the committee to apply appropriate weight to this. Point 2. The applicant has provided verbal evidence that a link road is not viable, point 6.23. Given the SAMDEV policy MD5B states a new link road is required, surely evidence as crucial as this should be in the public domain as opposed to private conversation and verbal communication between the applicant and the officer. In addition, no detailed consideration has been provided of why other routes were discarded. 3. The application seeks to increase the level of quarried material driven through the village by 3 times via a single carriageway road in a conservation area. In the report, point 4.67, the report refers to this stretch of road from the post office to the village hall by Condover Bridge, but does not deal with it. If lorries meet on that stretch of road, they must mount the pavement to pass, as photos show. In last month's full council meeting, Shropshire Council unanimously approved a motion, agenda item 16, motion 4, that resolves to, and I quote, widen the commonplace consultation launched by the Big Town Plan to cover the whole of Shropshire with the aim of allowing residents to identify where pavements and the walking environment is inadequate. This would enable the council to develop a list of locations that require attention. Secondly, ensure that pedestrians are placed at the top of the hierarchy of users in LTP4. This application is in direct conflict with a recently approved motion democratically voted for by full council. 4. There is basically no local support for it. Of the 75 public comments received on this application report, 73 are against it, 97.3% against 2 for it, which is 2.7%. 5. In the report, it states the following on the NPPF. In this regard, the Highway Authority must have regard to para 109 of the NPPF, which sets out that the development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. I, the parish council, and the overwhelming majority of the residents of Condover would argue that great weight should be applied to the cumulative impact of formalising a 3 times uplift in quarried material through the centre of Condover. 6. The Highways Development Control Team make repeated references to the historical nature of the application, that it goes back to the 1950s and historically more tonnage has been extracted than is currently allowed now. What this fails to recognise is the speed of growth of the village, and that Condover in the 1950s is a very different village to what it is today. To highlight this fact, the number of houses have increased by 20% in the past 5 years. 25 of these new houses are on the proposed quarry route. 7. In point 8.2 in the report, it refers to Human Rights Article 8, which balances the desires of landowners against the impact on residents. I would ask that the committee, when determining their case, apply great weight to the impact on the residents of Condover. 8. The committee should have in its mind that the current permitted level of quarried material in the 2013 application 13/00336/EIA is 50,000 tonnes per annum. In 2019, 181,000 tonnes was quarried. I, the PC and the residents of Condover have, due to recent experience, little faith in the ability of the applicant to stick to the regulations they are bound by, and are also disappointed by the lack of monitoring by the council of these breaches and in chasing up levy payment. This has led to a lot of ill feeling in the village. In conclusion, I would ask that the committee weigh up these points raised above and vote to refuse this application with the route as it is through the village. Fellow members will no doubt have planning cases in their own areas where officers ask for a business case plus detailed and costed plans. Yet in this application, the planning team have accepted only verbal confirmation that it is not viable to build a link road to the A49, and so, from Condover residents' point of view, casually override SAMDEV policy MD5B. Why has there been such apparent little oversight or scrutiny of this crucial decision to override SAMDEV guidance? Residents do not accept that the mitigation measures proposed by the applicant are sufficient. The committee may hear in the report that if the decision is overturned, there is financial risk to the council. This may give committee pause for thought. However, we are elected to stand up for our residents. And in this case, I believe the right thing to do is to listen to the residents of Condover, look at their human rights and require the applicant to find another route for the expansion of the quarry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. That's fine. Any more speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Idris Iqbal, solicitor. The next statement is from Robin Smithyman, the agent on behalf of the applicant, and it reads, Gonsul Quarry has been a consistent employer, feature and activity within the local character area since 1956. There's always been variations within its production and use of the local road network, with previously permitted limits of sales of up to 250,000 tonnes per annum. This application reflects a limit of 150,000 tonnes per annum. Sand and gravel can only be extracted where it is naturally formed, with the location of Gonsul Quarry serving local mineral demand and supporting requirements to promote economic stability and growth within the area of the county, acting sustainably in minimising local haulage distances. The currently permitted and utilised vehicle access route leads north along Station Road from the quarry, through Condover and onto the A49. This route being stipulated by Shropshire Highways and a legal obligation within a Section 106 agreement. This access route has been assessed by the applicant's highways consultant and Shropshire Council's highways officer, and it has been agreed that the route has the capacity for the 150,000 tonnes per annum proposed and meets all health and safety requirements. Both the highways officer and consultant agree that there is currently no other viable route due to either visibility and road dimension aspect and/or safety constraints. The applicant acknowledges the concerns raised as part of the application by local residents and members of the parish council and is proposing mitigation measures above what is currently required. These include a suggested public crossing point, a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit through Condover, and highways improvement works to allow easier access for vehicles. The use of Norton Farm as a storage/distribution facility also offers the opportunity to avoid HGVs associated with the Gonsul Quarry from passing through the village during school pickup and drop-off times. This process negating the need for the use of articulated vehicles from the quarry passing through the village. Thus, smaller vehicles will be used, which with coordination via vehicle tracking, will avoid quarry vehicles passing each other within the village. The operations would also generate significant funding for highway mitigation and maintenance works over the anticipated 4.5-year duration of the mineral extraction. It is proposed that the applicant continues to pay 9p per tonne into a highways fund to help support these works, together with a commitment to previously calculated sums. The sum associated with the southern extension area to be paid in advance to ensure the full financial commitment is made available by the operator up front. The application will therefore provide certainty for a fixed period of time, which will reduce the inconsistencies/fluctuations in peak vehicle movements, reduce the size of the vehicles from the quarry travelling on the route through Condover, and allow for both greater control and monitoring of quarry traffic to ensure the numbers of vehicle types are as agreed. The development is also for a short set period of time. The applicant accepts that the proposals do not involve provision of a new access to the A49, which is referred to in the development guidelines accompanying SAMDEV policy MD5B. However, the limited amount of mineral in the current site is insufficient to fund the major costs involved, and the applicant has also concluded that new access is not viable in practical terms. The current application therefore proposes continued access through Condover at a level which is at or below that of historical traffic movements from the quarry. There is potential that a northern mineral extension could be viable. If this is the case, Salop Sand and Gravel Supply Co Limited would work with residents, the Parish Council and Shropshire Council to fully explore alternative vehicle routes. And that's the end of the public speaking statement, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dave Evans, Chair. The planning officer, does he wish to clarify any points, please? Graham, do you wish to clarify any points or add anything?
No, I will wait for the debate, Chair, and if the need for clarification is identified, then I will come back with responses then, if that's okay.
Thank you. David Evans, Chair. I will now ask members of the committee for their comments. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. The solicitor will let me know who is the next one to speak. Thank you. Members now ready to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Before we proceed with the discussion, I note that Councillor Harris mentioned he had an interest previously working for Gonsall Quarry. Councillor Harris, could you clarify whether you'll be taking part in the discussion?
Got ya. Okay. I would like to say what I know about Solid Sand and Gravel. I think it has a bearing on everything. I mean, it's been a few years since I have worked for them, but I worked for them at Moorville and at the quarry that's listed on this application. I would take advice from the solicitor if I may.
Okay, yep, certainly, Councillor Harris. I think it would be ultimately your decision, but it's whether you would take into account what you know about the working practices of the applicant. Would you still have an open mind? And also taking into account, would a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, conclude that there was a real possibility of bias in your decision-making? Ultimately, I will leave the decision to you and whether you'd like to proceed.
I probably would like to speak, but maybe I should abstain from voting.
I think if there's an interest, unfortunately, you won't be able to take part in the debate or the vote.
Okay, then I'll take your advice and I won't do either.
Thank you, and noted, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Right.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have a indication to speak from Councillor Shinton.
Councillor Shinton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matt Shinton, Clibham Mortimer Division. As I have some experience with quarry lorries, bearing in mind my proximity to the Clee Hill setup, I do understand about their difficulties, if you like to put it like that. I understand the importance also of the economic benefits for having quarries in our area, because I think that's important both from a jobs point of view and for the need we have for whatever they are quarrying. Having said that, I'm afraid I read the documentation here with both this and the subsequent one, which is Norton Farm, and it seemed to me that it was like throwing ingredients into a bowl and mixing it all up and not coming out with anything that was edible. I think it's a dog's breakfast. All the different strands of it are totally unnecessary, because I'd like, if we could, can I have the picture of the actual site itself? Can we bring that up? Is that possible? No?
No.
Oh, can we zoom into the actual quarry? I mean, I can't see that, with the greatest of respect to anybody. Can we zoom in on the quarry? No. Okay. Oh. Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's fine. It just seems to me that we've got two different, but not different, two assimilated applications here. So the question of the length of time that this quarry will still have something to extract is far longer than 5 years. I would have put it more 10 plus. And if we are going to restore part of it sometime in the future, it's not going to be restored in a year even. It's going to take 3 or 4 years to restore that. So that would be an extension of the time when there would still be heavy goods vehicles going through Condover. To do 2 bites at the cherry for the developer over a new access off the A49 seems to me, again, a very chip-chop sort of way of doing things. He's going to pay an upfront sum, and then I understand he's going to pay 9 pence per tonne proposed. I'm sorry, this is a nonsense. The developer should pay for a new access off the A49, which will service all this particular site, because it then will be within his control. And this nonsense of an upfront sum and 9p per tonne, who's going to monitor that? Are we going to monitor it? This is an unnecessary nonsense which I cannot understand at all. I don't believe the timescales that have been indicated are realistic. As I say, at best 5 to 6 years of extraction will be followed by a possible another 4 or 5 years of reclamation work, and still Condover will be the hit person. I can't condemn Condover to another 10 years of this sort of disruption. So as far as I'm concerned, Chair, I shall be voting against this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharrington. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Turner, please, Chair.
Councillor David Turner, please.
Thank you, Chair. David Turner, Much Wenlock. It's been interesting listening to the planning officer's report, appraisal of this, and I share many of the concerns that Councillor Sharrington has expressed, and I've particularly been impressed by the various representations that have been sent to us by Cragg, Neil Daly, Sarah Lean, Gary D, Debbie James, maybe others, and also the very clear deposition made by Councillor Dan Morris, and indeed the parish council. All helpful stuff, and we mustn't, whilst plainly we have to make decisions based on policy issues. The experience of local people is something that we have to give considerable weight to, because it isn't us by and large who are witnessing it. And I have to say that although I don't live very far away, Condover isn't on one of my routes, so I'm grateful for the illustration. However, I do have one question which doesn't need to be answered now, but I'd like it to be replied by either by Graham French or by Mark Wootton, and that is the 9p a tonne which Councillor Sharrington referred to, which is in the report. Did I read somewhere that whilst a contribution may be made in terms of a lump sum and an amount per tonne by the applicant, that there is no direct correlation between the amount of money that is accumulated by Shropshire Council in that way and the amount of money that is spent on highways improvements for the people of Condover? Chairman, I may have other issues in due course, but I want to listen to the debate, and I'll come back there if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Mark Wootton want to comment on that, or Graham French at the moment?
Chair, may I respond, please, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, there is the 9p per tonne would go into a ring-fenced account, which was dedicated to the expenditure on upgrading, improvement, maintenance of the road through Condover, which the quarry traffic used. It wouldn't be absorbed into some kind of a anonymous central pot. At the moment, there's £8,000 that has been paid. Another 42,000 is owed. And just to clarify, the 9p per tonne for this application based on the remainder of 610,000 tonnes in the site would equate to a further £65,000. Now, instead of paying that on a pence per tonne basis, the applicant has offered to pay that upfront as a lump sum, so that all of that money, £115,000, is available to provide costs to fund highway maintenance, repair, to fund the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and anything else that is affordable that the council considers is required would be available from an early stage in any development to target on the highway infrastructure in Condover. There's no equivalent source of funding for that. It comes from this application, or it's not available. Thank you.
Did you want to come back, David Turner, or?
Not at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Parsons, please, Chair.
Councillor Tony Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tony Parsons, Basin Hill, Colum and Sutton. Obviously, this is an application that has got a lot of heat amongst the local residents. I think all of our members have received quite a lot of correspondence on these two particular issues, but I'll stick with this one in particular. And we've seen evidence that, and this goes back, I think, to the trust in the applicant and whether people believe that if this application was accepted, whether it would proceed as it's down on paper here. You know, we've seen previously evidence of trucks that are running through the village outside of the operating hours that they should be doing, and we've also had comments about the amount of sand and gravel that's being taken out of the quarry at this time, far in excess of what the previous planning application provided. And so there is an issue of trust, I think, as to how things will move forward. And I think we see that right across the county. You know, we see applications where conditions are attached and then they're, well, either flouted or ignored. There's very little monitoring of breaches of conditions and very little enforcement of breaches of conditions. And so we're all worried about how applications like this will proceed. Now, I know that quite a large part of this case is saying, well, you know, we've been doing it like this for 50 years, and so therefore, well, it's okay to continue to do that. Well, we've been burning coal for 100 years, but we're not doing that anymore. Things do progress over a period of time. And I see that the developer is suggesting some changes to the way that traffic would pass through the village in order to alleviate some of the problems associated with the HGV vehicles. There's this indication of reducing the speed limit from 30 mile an hour to 20 mile an hour. I didn't notice in any of the notifications I received from residents anyone complaining about speed in traffic. It seemed more to be the case that traffic could hardly pass one another and that trucks were barely scraping by one another, going into the hedge, up the curb and putting people at risk on pavements and on bicycles and motorcycles. So I don't think that some of the conditions that are being proposed will necessarily solve the problems that are already there in Condover. My view is that the SAMDEV plan from December 2015 clearly shows that in order for any extension of the process at this quarry to go ahead, there was a requirement that there should be a new road between the quarry and the A49 that would take the traffic away from Condover village. Now, I've heard obviously the planning officers say that there are two issues there. One is the cost of the road for the developer, and the second one is an issue with Highways England as to whether that road would fit within their sort of bounds as what might be required. But I think, you know, if we write things down in policies like this, we should be looking to implement them, and I'm sure there must be a way around that by providing that new road to the A49. So on the basis of what we have in front of us, then I'm not prepared to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Boddington, please.
Councillor Andy Boddington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Much of the points I was going to make have been already said, and I certainly won't be supporting this application. I think that we need to stick with the local development plan, which says that there is a need for a link road to the A49 before this quarry expands. The proposed minor works in Condover don't solve the problem of heavy traffic through Condover, and the way to solve that problem is not to have heavy traffic from the quarry going through Condover, and that's what our planning policy says. So I'm going to oppose this, and as nobody has done it so far, then could I put forward a proposal that we oppose the officer's recommendation, and we oppose the application on the grounds that it breaches MD5B. And I would add that I think the officer's interpretation of MPF 109 isn't correct. This is an occasion where the traffic is so excessive that we can say no on the grounds of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Motley, please, Chair.
Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Councillor Cecilia Motley from the Corvedale Division. There are all sorts of things that worry me enormously about this report. First of all, I find it extremely opaque. It's quite difficult. It's almost one of those reports that kind of slides away from you as you try to read it. There is no real clarity to it. There are a lot of ifs and buts, but again, a feeling that actually there is no real guidance to this. I get the impression of an applicant who is, yes, going to make a donation towards damage that he anticipates his lorry is doing to a conservation area in Condover. And frankly, I find that slightly grotesque, I have to tell you. There is an acknowledgement in this that these lorries are doing serious damage to a conservation area, and even worse, are having to mount the pavement in a narrow road with a primary school on it. I just find that unacceptable, completely unacceptable. I think this sort of ifs and buts about the extent of the expansion of the quarry don't in any way mask the fact that we need a completely different route to get these lorries out onto the A49, and I'm afraid this one has just got to be looked at straight in the face. It is quite unacceptable to carry on as we are at the moment. And the quarry may have been there since the 1950s, but as the local member Dan Morris pointed out, Condover has changed considerably in that time. It's had a lot of houses, and a lot more houses are now being affected by this route than were previously in those golden days of the 1950s when nobody terribly minded quarry lorries thundering past them. This is not an acceptable application in its present form, I fear. I think it should be refused, and I think it should be reworked, and I think we need to see a further application with a proposal, a firm proposal, to actually mitigate the damage being done to Condover by rerouting those enormous great lorries. Reducing the size of them isn't going to do it, quite frankly. It just means that there are going to be more of them. And it's not going to mitigate the damage being done. So I'm afraid we've just got to look at this in a completely different way. So I'm afraid I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Woodward, please, Chair.
Councillor Tina Woodward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Tina Woodward. I've listened with interest to what's been said, and I've read all the information provided by residents, and there's clearly concerns, and I do agree with Councillor Parsons that there is a trust issue here. But to me, the officer has said that it's guidelines regarding the MD5B, but to me, as a committee, we don't have the information that the officer had before him when he came to the conclusion regarding what has been put forward by the applicant regarding connecting route to the A49. What I would say is that to me, it's explicit in what its meaning is. It's not open to interpretation. It expected something to take place, and that was a link road. And I think other councillors have expressed that as well. So, Chairman, I cannot support this application as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Hignett, please, Chair.
Councillor Nick Hignett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Hignett, Ray Valley Ward. Listen very carefully to all of the information that's been given. Read very carefully all of the information that's written down for us. My consideration is that Condover residents are already paying a high price for having this quarry on their doorstep. The overproduction at the quarry seems endemic, and yet the A49 is considered not viable. They've extracted 3 times the amount that they were permitted in 2017 under an agreement for 50,000 tonnes per annum. If they're producing 3 times as much as that, then surely the A49 link starts to become more viable. I'm a bit concerned that as committee members, we've not been given enough detailed information about why this A49 link is not considered viable. It mentions verbal discussions with officers, but in my opinion, this is not satisfactory for us to be able to make a full and detailed consideration. I agree with other members' comments that have been passed, and particularly think that Councillor Dan Morris gave a really good summary and reasoned as to why we should not be supporting this application, and I shall not be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Turner, please, Chair.
Councillor David Turner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Turner, Much Wenlock. I think that I'd like to bring this to a conclusion fairly soon now. I think Councillor Parsons made a very good point about the size of the wagons. It just crossed my mind that there's two issues about lorries that serve quarries, and being the representative of Much Wenlock, you'll be aware that there's a long history of quarrying here, and because when these consents were granted, we're talking about very much smaller lorries which were nowhere near as efficient, very much slower, and of course many people who lived close to the quarry were deriving their livelihood from those quarries. Life has changed without a doubt, and the weight of these lorries is greater. The weight of the lorries is greater. They're wider, they're larger, they're faster, and certainly in the case of replacing movements through Condover currently being undertaken by articulated lorries by 20-ton rigids, does mean there is the possibility, and there is the possibility that those lorries will move faster than the Arctics that are currently negotiating their way over the footways and round the buses and so on and so forth. I think that the point about Highways England, the A49, made by Councillor Hignett, is a sound one. If Highways England are concerned about the impact of this operation on any potential access to Highways England, think about what Condover residents are suffering at the moment. So I think that and of course there is a greater appreciation of the risks today than there was 50 or 60 or 70 years ago. So on that basis, Chair, and on the basis of what I've heard before, I don't believe that Councillor Boddington has got a seconder, and I will be pleased to second the proposal to refuse the application on the grounds that he indicated.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Thank you. Any more speakers, please? No.
No further indications, Chair.
Right.
May I speak, Chair?
I was just going to ask you to come in, Graham, to speak and to clarify some of the points.
Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify very quickly before members make their decision, that the reason for the non-viability of the A49 alternative routes at this stage is because there's a limited amount of mineral remaining in this site. By comparison with the 0.61 million tonnes that is in this site, there's about, I think, 4 million tonnes plus in the northern extension. So the northern extension is far more capable of supporting the cost of the new access, which is substantial, of the order of a couple of £1 million, I think. But even if the funding can be accommodated by a mineral proposal, and in this case, there's not enough mineral in the site to justify, and the applicant would need to link the two allocations together to get the certainty that there would be funding. But even if there was sufficient funding to be generated to fund the new access, there is an in-principle objection from Highways England, which we've encountered elsewhere, which seeks to avoid proliferation of minor accesses and increased traffic onto the trunk road. And they've had that discussion, the applicant has had that discussion with Highways England, and there hasn't been any movement on that, which is why they're in this situation. Now, following on from that, I would just like to refer to the fact that we have Mark Wotton, the Highways officer, here today. And also, I think that we're talking in terms of a highway objection. Now, there is specific guidance in the MPPF, paragraph 104, which relates to highway objections. In this case, the highway officer, and Mark Wotton will be able to clarify further on this, has not objected to the proposals, and I hope they'll have the opportunity to give a brief representation to the committee before they make a decision. In those circumstances, and the solicitor will probably make some advice to the committee also, a refusal on highway grounds would be more difficult to defend because the Highway Authority has not supported it, and there is evidence that's been provided that indicates that whilst there is clearly a concern about large vehicle movements through Condover, the capacity is there isn't a highway capacity refusal justification for it, and at the same time there is a clear indication that that is not possible to economically deliver the application in the context of the current proposals because of the in-principle objection from Highway England. So what we're then left with is a situation where we have an allocated mineral site with 0.61 million tonnes of mineral in the ground, and there is a policy presumption that an allocated site will be will succeed, as it were. And there is also planning policy, standard policy MD16, which seeks to avoid sterilisation. If this application does not proceed, then the expectation would be that the applicant will need to restore the site, the plant will need to be removed and decommissioned, and at that point it becomes uneconomic to come back in and recover the mineral in this area because it's not large enough to justify the investment in new plants. So we're then in a situation where we are going against the advice of the Highways Officer, and we're also involved in sterilising mineral against policy MD16. So what I accept fully the direction that members look as if they're going in on this, but I would wish to sort of alert them to the sort of legal policy context in terms of being able to justify a refusal decision on an appeal, which the applicant could do. Can I ask maybe that the officer Mark Wotton is given the opportunity to just clarify the Highway Authority position on this, please, Chair?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, Mark, if you want to come in there, please.
Hello, Mark Wotton, Highways. Members of the Planning Committee, I'm certainly not going to try and convince members that this is by any means ideal. The continued sort of HGV routes through Condover has been looked at for many years, and indeed I'm certainly aware of the discussions which have taken place regarding potential access onto the A49, and I'm aware there are significant costs that are involved in carrying out those works, added to the issues of resolving design technical issues with Highways England. In relation to this particular application, clearly it's got to be, from our perspective, from the highway perspective, it's got to be looked at on its own individual merits. And although initially the indication was that 6.5 years was going to take to remove this material, clearly some of that material has already been extracted, which means that, to all intents and purposes, the life of this site will be in the order of 4.5 years. Some of the mitigation that's been looked at, including the mini roundabout, pedestrian crossing. I think from the Highway Authority's perspective, I think we see merit in the potential to put a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit through Condover, which would aid the school, and the rest of the money, I suspect, would be directed towards highway maintenance. What also is being proposed here is to have the applicant's own maximum two vehicles shuttling between the quarry site and Norton Farm, which in effect would control those movements such that they wouldn't meet en route, and obviously those vehicle drivers would be aware of the local situation in Condover. Overall, this is not a straightforward application, Chair and members of the Planning Committee, and it's I can understand some of the concerns that have been expressed by both members and indeed by the public at large. But on balance, I think the highway position is that we would find it very difficult to sustain a highway objection to this development. I hope that assists, Chair.
Thank you. Before I put it to the committee, I'd like to say a few words. We've already heard that the applicant is extracting more mineral out than he had permission for originally. There's nothing to stop this applicant putting another 2 vehicles on the road once he gets into full swing of extraction. This is going to have a detrimental effect of the people of Condover Village, and I cannot bear to put these people through any more than what they've already gone through. The impact must be unbelievable in the village, and as you say, on about taking articulated lorries off the road, putting 2 20-tonners on. How long is it going to be before we got 4 20-tonners on and then 6 20-tonners on, because the history of extraction has gone past the 50,000 to 100,000 to 200,000. So once this gets going, gets fully wound up, I can see more vehicles going through there every day, because I am sure that we're not going to just leave it at 2 vehicles lugging sand, mineral from here to Norton Farm. So therefore, I cannot support this application. And now I will ask for the proposer of the recommendation, please, which is Councillor Andy Boddington. Could you just clarify your proposal?
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. We've had an indication from Councillor Parsons, who would like to speak.
Councillor Parsons. Councillor Parsons.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, the point of what the reason that we are looking to refuse this application is because it fails to comply with SAMDEV schedule MD5B. It doesn't comply with our own policy. That is the reason, in my view, why this application should be refused. To come back to the issue that we've already talked about earlier, about Highways England view on having this new road to the A49. Let me say, as the member for Basin Hill, that where these trucks currently come out from Condover, just on the fast straight between Church Stretton and Basin Hill, and turning slowly right to get to the A5, I consider that to be a very dangerous situation, and I don't believe that putting a new road in will be anywhere near as dangerous as that.
Thank you to Councillor Parsons. Right, with a proposal by Councillor Boddington to refuse the application. Have you got your reasons for, just to clarify, Councillor Boddington, on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. We refuse this application because it breaches MD5B and because of our concerns about the pressure of quarry traffic on Condover Village and on residents' well-being.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. The seconder was Councillor Harris. Is that correct?
Turner.
No, Turner.
Councillor Turner, please. Sorry. Councillor Harris declared an interest. That's right. Councillor Turner.
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Okay. So I will now put it to the vote. Could the solicitor ask for the vote to be recorded, please, and take the names?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, the proposal is to refuse the application, contrary to the officer's recommendation. So just before we proceed to the vote, I just want to be clear on the reasons for refusal. Our members stating that refusal is based on the failure to comply with development guidelines of SAMDEV policy MD5, 5B, requiring delivery of an alternative access.
Yes.
And associated continued disturbance from the quarry from the HGV movement through the Condover Village and Conservation Area.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. Okay, I will take the vote. Please, can you confirm whether you'll be for or against the proposal, which is for refusal? And can I kindly remind members to only take part if you've been present for the whole of the item. Starting with Councillor Boddington.
For.
Councillor Hignett.
For.
Councillor Motley.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Shinton.
For.
Councillor Woodward.
For.
Councillor Turner.
For.
And Councillor Evans.
For.
That's unanimous. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 8 votes for the proposal, Chair.
Okay, so 8 votes for the refusal of the application. Thank you, committee. Do we want to have a comfort break now for 5 minutes, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll have a comfort break for 5 minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I'm sorry I couldn't take part, but I had technical difficulties.
Okay, Councillor Tyndall, I fully understand that. Thank you.
Yep.
Right, committee, we now go into item 6, which is Norton Farm, Condover. It's a satellite stockyard to serve the operation of Nosa Quali. David Evans will now ask the planning officer to read the application, please. Thank you, Graham.
Chairman, David Turner, Much Wenlock. Just on a point of procedure, I may be completely wrong in this, but is this an application that should still be heard in the light of the refusal of the previous one? I could seek a bit of guidance on that, if you don't mind.
Can Idris answer that question for me, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would defer to the planning officer, but it would be my opinion that it's a standalone application and therefore should be considered, but I will double check with the planning officer. Graham, can you comment?
Thank you.
Is Graham there, please?
Graham, are you still in the meeting?
I'm here, yes, I'm here, yes. Idris, has the meeting commenced yet?
Dad, we just asked a question. Idris asking a question.
Right, okay, I think that in view of the interrelationship between the previous application and the current application, that this one is deemed refused by default. So I don't intend to read the entire sort of presentation that I had, just to agree with Idris, a form of wording for a refusal on the basis that the application is linked to a proposal for extension of Gonsall Quarry, which has been refused. And that it does not merit, therefore, the justification for the proposal in policy terms supporting a mineral application is no longer, therefore, there, and it is not justified to develop the sites in isolation of the mineral consent and in conflict with policy SAMDEP policy CS5.
All right, can you come back and clarify Idris on that, please?
I think in line with Graham's conclusion, if it is interlinked with the previous application, the actual determination of the application, well, being deferred, well, moving on to item number 7 would be at your discretion, Chair.
Well, since the application has been deferred, and what was the term that Graham used on this one? It's under planning policy. This one being refused as well, was it, Graham?
Yes, I was recommending that, say, this application is interrelated to the previous agenda item, which has been refused. The justification for this was based on the position that the previous application would be approved and that would therefore derive support from mineral policy. As the application has been refused, that justification is no longer there. The development it represents encroachment into open countryside in conflict with core strategy policy CS5. Right,
so we could refuse it under CS5.
Yes.
Yes, but I think as Richard Fortune has just pointed out, we will still need to have a formal vote as it is an application in its own right.
Okay, yes. Well, could I put that as a proposal and a seconder for that then, please?
Chair, David Turner.
That, Chair.
Much Wenlock, I'd be very... ladies first, Councillor Shinton.
No, lady. I'm happy to propose that. That's Councillor Mad Shinton from the Clibber Mortimer Division.
On that basis, Chair, I'm prepared to second it. David Turner from Much Wenlock.
Okay, so that's proposed and seconded for refusal under CS5 of planning policy. Could I ask the solicitor now to take a vote on it, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we got a proposal to refuse permission. Please, can you indicate whether you are for or against the proposal? Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris? Oh, sorry, Councillor Harris is not voting on his own. Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That's carried as a refusal. Thank you very much. We now go on to item number 7, which is Beehive, Currid Lane, Shifnal, and I'll ask Mr. Fortune if he'll Read the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. This application is a proposal for 9 affordable dwellings on the site of the currently closed Beehive Inn in Shiflow on the corner of Couriers Lane and Broadway. I think I'll talk members through the slides and the photographs we got of the area, and then I'll do a brief resume of the council officer's position on this one. First slide shows us the location of the outlined in red. On the left hand side is the Beehive building that's sat on the corner of the road junction, and then to the rear of it is essentially an open area that's been functioning as its car park. Immediately to the east is a club building, and to the north we can see there are 2-storey dwellings on that side. On the southern side of Couriers Lane to the south are bungalows, and then the larger building that is shaded grey there with the grey occurs through that is St Andrew's Hall. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed site layout. Going from left to right as we're looking at it, 3 units are proposed on essentially the footprint of where the public house building is, so maintaining that same sense of enclosure onto the road junction. There is then behind that a private drive serving a shared parking court, with then to the right of that a further terrace of 3 houses, with a gable end onto Couriers Lane. And then we have further along another 3 houses that are actually fronting onto Couriers Lane in that location. Next slide, please. In this landscaping plan, it shows a number of adjustments that have been made during the course of the application. The railing treatment that we can see detail of at the bottom of that screen is what would be along the road frontages to Couriers Lane and wrapping around onto Broadway. And then the northern boundary to the rear gardens will be the 1.8 metre close border fencing to give those gardens. The brown shading shows the parking, which is delivered at 2 spaces per dwelling. And obviously the green areas is the incidental landscaping in connection with the scheme, and tree planting along that boundary and the garden boundaries, proposing mountain ash, silver birch and some bird cherry. Next slide, please. This again is a design of the properties. These are the terrace that we're facing onto Broadway, and also that at right angles to the road. The gable featured hipped end elements would be the elements closest to the road junction and Couriers Lane, which would have a rendered finish, remainder of the units being of a brick finish. And during negotiations, the addition chimneys has been agreed as part of the development.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. And this is the properties at front onto Couriers Lane itself at the east end of the site. These would be, again, a simple terrace with the 4 gable ends in this case rather than the hip tree treatment. All these bedroom units are 3 bedrooms, which it responds to an identified need as of January 2021 for 27 units of affordable housing that would provide 3 bedrooms in Shiflow. So this would make a contribution of 1/3 to that requirement. Next slide, please. Again, this is quite small scale, but it does show sort of illustration of the street scene details. Here to the top is the view that would be to Couriers Lane, which shows the gaps between the buildings blocks created by the orientation of the central elements in terms of the arrangement facing to the lane. The lower view is the view to Broadway or High Street. The building on the left is some existing dwellings that are there. So that shows the scale of the proposal, which is the right-hand element in comparison. Next one, please. Again, this is just a general drainage detail. It shows there's a attenuation crate arrangement in the shared private drive area to achieve the sustainable drainage, which our higher engineers are content with in this site. Next slide, please. Right, again, that's just level of details. We can just, it's a relatively level site, so move on to the next slide, please. This shows us the site context, the site being there in red. The purpose of this plan is to show the two significant areas of public open space, community space that is available in the vicinity of the site. Given that we have an issue here, as whilst we have a open space requirement with housing developments, clearly the amount that can be delivered on sites of relatively small numbers of houses is very restricted. But in this particular case, it does demonstrate that more formal areas of recreation are within walking distance of the site. Next slide, please. Again, this shows the existing public house building that was closed in 2017. Its core position at Couriers Lane. These are looking sort of north, northwest, northeastwards. Next slide, please. Again, it's the view really from the north, looking back southwards along Broadway, and the site being there on the white building on the left-hand side. Next one, please. This is the sort of the car park area at the rear. This shows us the left-hand side, just below the white car, is that club building that's just the east of the site, and there we get a view of the bungalows that are on the opposite side of the road. Next slide, please. Again, it's another view looking at the site from the opposite side of Couriers Lane in a northeasterly direction. Again, seeing the single-storey flat roof club building, and then the two-storey dwellings to the north. Next slide, please. Yeah, another view to the north, the houses there, and the houses to the left are those that are fronting onto Broadway, and the public house building itself is just off shot to the left-hand side. Next slide, please. Again, another view of the frontage, essentially from the opposite the club building, and the site there is the open area. You can see with the pub in the white at the bottom end. Next slide, please. Just getting further images of bungalows on the opposite side of the road. Next, please. And that is again the pub building, and then the St Andrew's Hall. It's on the other side of the road at the junction of Couriers Lane with Broadway. Next one, please. Again, third shot of bungalows opposite. Next, please. And again, just an indication of the current sort of state of the land that forms the characteristic of the public house. And that may be the final slide. If we just check, yes, it is. If we could go back to the site plan or the landscape plan, please, Tim. Thank you, that's sufficient, thank you. So as I say, this is a situation where, in terms of the actual development, the objections have been raised by the Shipwell Town Council, relates to the orientation of the central block of 3 units, which is blocks 4 to 6. You'll see in their representations, both that's in the report and also that you received as attachments, and I believe also which will be read out later. They're of a view that element should be turned so it faces Couriers Lane to the south, and also made a suggestion about an archway with parking to the rear. On that archway suggestion and parking to the rear, I sort of comment that really the plot is not sufficiently deep really to achieve that arrangement if you're also going to provide a garden space for the properties as well. So it would be the situation that if those units were to be turned through 90 degrees, it's very likely that you would have a reduction in numbers achievable, and you know, you would still need that drive and parking arrangement to serve the properties at front, the Broadway, and potentially some units in this particular element. So that is the only sort of really grounds for objection that's been raised is in relation to that element. The officer view that is that the arrangement as proposed here is acceptable, and it does have the benefit of maintaining a fairly sort of more open character to the development on interrelations development on Careers Lane and the bungalows opposite. You know, there will be more significant gaps between the building blocks than would be the case if you ended up effectively with a terrace running along that side of the road. But in terms of the overall considerations here, firstly, there is the fact that we have a public house building, but given that it closed in 2017, and given the number of hostels that are available in Sheffield, including 2 other ones within 100 metres of the site, the officer view is that there isn't a reason in terms of loss of community facility that we could resist the loss of the public house here. There's been a heritage impact assessment done, and the conservation officers conclude also that there are not any merits in requiring retention of the in-building as a heritage asset in this case, and they're raising no objections to the scheme. As I say, it is essentially a brownfield site, so in terms of redevelopment, particularly for affordable housing in an existing town location, it does not raise any in-principle objections. The applicants are a registered social landlord, and we would be achieving 6 units for affordable rent and 3 for shared ownership as part of this scheme. The designs of the houses which the scene officers consider is appropriate for this location in Sheffield in this particular area. There are no highway objections, drainage are content, and there are no issues in terms of adverse neighbour impacts or ecology matters that would justify refusal in this case. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard, very much. And that's the speaker. Cecilia, are the speakers on this?
Thank you, Chair.
Would you read the statements, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first statement is from Sheffield Town Council, and it reads, members of Sheffield Town Council approve the following response to the planning application detailed above at the Planning Committee held on Thursday, 11th of March 2021. It is requested that these comments are related to the Southern Planning Committee on 16th of March 2021 when this matter is considered. Whilst the Town Council has no objection to the principle of residential development of the site, it objects to the layout and particularly the siting of block 4 to 6 Gable End onto Careers Lane, which is out of character with development in the area, which is frontage development onto roads. The government is proposing to strengthen national policy on design quality and community engagement in design of their areas. The Town Council has produced a neighbourhood plan, which is part of the development plan, and has a policy requiring high quality design in keeping with the scale and character of buildings and layout of the area. The character of the area is buildings fronting the road and not gable end on, and so the layout is contrary to policy. The Town Council has asked for this block to be turned so that it fronts a road similar to block 7 to 9. Access to the rear car park could be through an arch, which is the same as and so in character with existing development nearby. Indeed, it is noteworthy that the applicant's own heritage impact statement includes several photos of existing developments in the vicinity, and each one only shows frontage development and also highlight the existing archway developments. The applicant's own statement therefore reinforces the Town Council's views, as there are no examples of gable end on developments on frontages to substantiate that this form of layout is characteristic. The officer's report fails to describe the character of the area and to justify how the layout proposed is in keeping with the character as required by policy. The reason given by officers for not turning the block is that it is opposite to bungalows. However, there are many examples of houses being on the opposite side of a road to bungalows. The block will be to the north, and the distance between the road, pavements and front gardens between would mean that the block would have no adverse effect to outweigh the policy objection on design. It is also noted that whilst the officers are saying that turning the block would, despite the distance between, have an adverse effect on the bungalows, they are happy to allow blocks 4 to 6 to be sited immediately adjacent to the boundaries of rear gardens to houses at the rear, but it would also be sited to the south and therefore not only have an overbearing impact, but have a shadow effect on those gardens. How can a 2-story block immediately adjacent to and south of rear gardens be acceptable, but a block on the other side of the road and to the north of bungalows not be acceptable? The Town Council requests that the committee to either to refuse the application on design grounds or to defer for the applicant to amend the scheme. The second statement, Chair, is from Scott Drummond on behalf of the applicant. I'm writing this email to confirm a few points on the above application for 9 affordable houses in the former Beehive Pub, Shifnal, which has a recommendation for approval and is supported by all council consultees. You may be aware of TC Homes, as we are a local developer that mainly focuses on affordable housing. We work with local housing associations, in brackets Housing Plus, Recon and Connexus, and the affordable team at the council to develop land in areas that have high demand for affordable houses. I'm not sure if you have had time to see the site, but the pub has now been closed for several years, has become an eyesore and a health and safety issue in the area. At the end of Careers Lane is Shifnal Primary School, so this area gets a lot of foot traffic, and at the moment the pub has an open car park, which has broken glass and is a danger to young children and also could encourage antisocial behaviour. The pub has been broken into several times and has been vandalised, including being used as a place to sleep overnight. TC Homes has partnered with Housing Plus, in brackets SEP Sergeant, for this application, and it will bring rented and shared ownership houses into the town. Shifnal has a very high demand for affordable houses, and to be able to secure a development like this in the town is very special. The application all the way through the process has been very positive, with the case officer enabling team conservation and tree officer all in support of the application. We engaged with the town council at the start of the process, and generally they were happy to see the site develop. However, they have objected to the orientation of the central plots. Town Council response: no objection to the principle of affordable housing on the site. The plots have been designed to discourage antisocial behaviour in the private drive, as the houses will overlook the space. The Town Council's layout proposal would also be in breach of Homes England and secured by design standards and guidelines, which may compromise the securing of social housing grant for the scheme and thus adversely impact on its viability. If the block was to be turned, the parking would be remote and you would have several drives directly coming off the road rather than the one parking courtyard. The orientation of the plots also creates different viewing angles, so the development creates some architectural interest externally. The case officer and conservation officer has confirmed they are happy with the scheme as it complies with policy and has supported the application. With all the above considerations, we hope that the application will be approved and TC Homes and Housing Plus can deliver some much needed affordable housing in the area. Thank you for your time. That concludes the public speaking statement, Chair.
Thank you very much. I understand Councillor Motley would like to ask Richard a question, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, Richard, I just wonder if you could clarify something for me, which is around the size of the garden plots behind 789. I'd just like to get an idea of the square meterage, if at all possible, because I'm trying to look at this from the point of view of what the Town Council is saying. If that middle block was swung around, and what effect that would have in terms of garden space. Could you give me any idea, or is that buried in the midst of obscurity?
Thank you. Yes, Richard Fortune, Principal Planner here. I can only give you some rough estimates, shall I say, at this stage. But obviously, in terms of the actual plot element, if we look next to plot 7 to 9, we got essentially 2 sort of parking spaces, sort of tandem parking arrangements. So that's going to be a depth of around the brown area is going to be a depth of between sort of 9 and 10 metres. So right. We got rear gardens here that essentially probably going to be around the sort of I'd say sort of 7 to 8 metre depth, as it were. So that in itself is, in terms of its relationship with the northern site boundary and the gardens on the opposite side, that's giving us essentially the sort of separation distance we need there. I think that the point is that in terms of were you to turn that middle block, so essentially it was in line with plots 7 to 9 in terms of fronting there. Yes, clearly you would create similar depth of gardens, but obviously there's the town council suggestion of an archway through to parking at the rear. I think the officer points here that isn't going to be a sufficient rear garden depth to achieve a operable parking court there and have private amenity space. If you turn that unit through 90 degrees, you then got to find essentially space for the 6 parking spaces currently serving that, which in this layout is obviously immediately to the west of them off that private drive, to also serve these units. So you're either going to end up with an arrangement that the parking is going to be somewhat detached from the dwellings it serves, but a combination still off the drive and some immediately next to it, and then you will be getting a further proliferation of accesses along Courier's Lane, rather than the enclosure and the sort of element of green planting and sort of screening we've got indicated here. So it would be a possible arrangement for officers who don't see that it has any merits greater than the arrangements already before us in this application.
Thank you very much, Richard. Could I just speak now? I'm sorry to barge in front of Madge, Chairman, but would that be all right? And then you won't have to listen to me later. I have to say that I think Richard's analysis of all this, as far as I can see, is absolutely spot on. The problem is, if you swing that block around, that middle block around, I think you're going to end up with something which is actually has much less interest to it than the present arrangement, because I think you're just going to then have, as he says, too many entrances onto the lane. You're going to lose out on garden space, and as far as the overlooking is concerned, to the presumably the bungalows at the back and their gardens, if we can be careful with the fenestration, so that we can avoid too much overlooking. I think that would deal with that, and I'm not quite sure how the sun rises and sets in this particular location, in terms of how much shadowing there's going to be. But I think when we're doing these schemes, we do need to try and get some interest in them, because otherwise they can all just be very blank and blocky. And at least the arrangement that is proposed here is actually breaking the site up, so that it doesn't all look too linear. So I have to say that with the greatest respect to Shifnal Town Council, I don't think I agree with them on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Idris, next speaker, please.
Councillor Shinton, please, Chair.
Councillor Shinton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Shinton, Clibberry Mortimer Division. I actually like this scheme. I think it's positioned geographically within Shifnal, where in walking distance they've got 2 park areas, they've got a primary school on down Courier's Lane. These are going to be family homes. When it comes to end block and etc., I don't see how you could reorganise that middle block. I really don't, and still retain some space within the area of the development group. I like the railings. I would like to think that any planting that took place, can we forget the silver birch for a bit? I know it's easy, it's cheap, and you can pop it in, but it'd be really nice if we had sorbus, which is mountain ash, different varieties, and we also had varieties of hawthorn. There's some lovely red and pink flowers that you can get within that, and these are trees which don't get too long, too tall, drop twigs everywhere and actually become a bit of a pain in the butt. So I'd like to see a bit of imagination. What I see on page 83, 412, council tree recommendations. I didn't see any big trees on the original site. Richard, is there some big trees we need to be careful about? I'm done.
Could you come in there, Richard, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Richard 14. On site itself, none that I'm aware of. I think there was reference to the actual intended proposed trees planting, and we have condition 8 in the recommendations where we actually are reserving judgment on precise species that might be there in response to those comments from the trees team. In that way, I mean, it requires a final landscape plan to be submitted for approval. So that's where I think we take your point. We need to ensure that whatever is planted is going to be long term, is going to make sense in that location.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. And if we've got children passing by down to the primary school or down to the park area, we need to have different trees so that they actually learn, you know, there are other things besides beech and besides birch and all the rest of it. So if we could just be a bit more imaginative there, I'd be grateful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Madge. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Parsons, please, Chair.
Tony Parsons, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendation of officers here to grant permission to this particular scheme. We know from the report there is a big demand in Shifnal for this type of housing, with over 200 people on the 200 households on the waiting list. This to me looks a good scheme. There are 6 houses here for affordable rent, which is rare to see even in a development of this small size. And I understand that to a degree Shifnal Council's views as far as design is concerned, but like Councillor Motley, I think this actually fits together quite well. And so I'll move that we grant permission to this particular scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Boddington, please, Chair.
Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this scheme. I think it's right for Shifnal, and I'm happy to second the motion to approve it.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Hignett, please, Chair.
Councillor Nick Hignett, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Hignett, Ray Valley. My thunder has been stolen because I was going to second the scheme. I'm in support of it. I don't think it's a perfect layout. I think they've had to shoehorn it in a little bit to get the amount in. I feel sorry in a way for the residents of Block 8 because they've got to access their garden by going on 3 sides of Block 7 by the looks of it, which is a bit of a shame. But you couldn't turn the block in the middle the other way because you'd have the same situation and same problem there, and it would also push onto the access road going to 1, 2 and 3. So with that proviso, which is a little bit of a shame, but I think they've done the best that they can with the layout, and as has been mentioned, the affordable housing will be very welcome. So I support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hignett. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Harris, please, Chair.
Simon Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully agree with what everybody has said. As a champion of what I call council housing, the old-fashioned term, I fully agree. Shifnal has took a vast amount of development over these past few years, and the ability to drop in affordable housing and rentable housing has been quite negative in my view, and this is an actual breakthrough for Shifnal, I think, and it really is a good scheme for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Turner, please, Chair.
Councillor David Turner, please.
Thank you, Chair. David Turner, much Wenlock. Just very briefly to say that I'm not particularly familiar with the lie of the land in Shifnal, and still less its pubs, and indeed many pubs over the last 12 months. But the 2 adjacent pubs, the White Hart and the Wheat Sheaf, are considerably more attractive than the Beehive ever was, and certainly than it is at present. This is a site that needs to be developed. It is an eyesore at present, and as was mentioned in the applicant's representation, there are risks associated with it as well. So I think in the interests of the local residents, what's being proposed is going to be better than that, and that may be damning with faint praise. But I support the comments that have been made so far, and I will certainly be supporting this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Mr. Ford, you want to come back, please?
Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Just to cover one point, obviously, where the Town Council did make reference to the fact that his middle block meant that his northern end was tight on the northern property boundary, and what potential impact that might have on neighbour amenity. If members have got their agenda to hand and the plan at the start of that item as well, just for comparison, just like to point out that the area immediately to the north of the proposed private driving car park area, where on the slide we can see a sort of small square, little small square area, and that's it, and the area that's to the west and north of that. That in fact is a car park serving the properties that are fronting Broadway, and the area next to it means that if you look at the map that we have on the plan, it shows that that particular piece of garden area there is not, it does achieve quite a big separation distance to the houses that are to the north. So it's acknowledged there would be some overshadowing, but it's not going to impact on neighbour amenity to an extent that would justify refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from Edwardson or not? No other comments?
No more comments, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any more speakers?
No further indications to speak, Chair.
Sorry?
No further indications to speak.
Okay. Has the solicitor got any comments to make or add?
No comments to make.
Okay. So I've now got a proposer, which was Tony Parsons' proposal, seconded by Councillor Boddington.
Yeah.
I will ask the solicitor now to take the vote, because they vote in favour of, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, we have a proposal to approve the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation. This will be subject to the 2 changes to condition as set out in the schedule of late representations, which are to remove condition 4 and an amendment to condition 14. Could I please remind members to only vote if they've been present for the whole item? Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall? Councillor Tyndall?
You must have dropped out again.
Okay. Councillor Woodward?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you. That vote is carried as we accept the application of the officer. Thank you very much. We now go on to item 8, which is appeal and appeal decisions. Richard, please, could you do the appeals for me, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Got 8 to report, all decisions this time. So if you bear with me, I'll just go through them. The first one was application to remove a condition on 2005 permission restricting their unit to holiday use at the Longville Arms. That appeal was dismissed on the grounds of no private amenity space, the unit not having acceptable standards for full-time occupation, and there's also going to be an inconsistency with the allowing on appeal of the change of use of the pub to a dwelling, which will prevent both being implemented in their entirety. So that was an interesting take. We then have the next one was the lawful development certificate related to an adjacent unit at Longville Arms. This is the one that actually ended up being allowed because the inspector was convinced that there had been a breach in excess of 4 years without significant interruption, that unit has been used as permanent residential. That's going to be a conundrum to solve in the future there on that one. We then have a proposal which was for an open market dwelling at Resting Field Snail Beach. Appeal dismissed. The inspector decided it would not be infilling as required by policy and would be largely surrounded by woodland. Would not be further enhancing the character of the area or bringing any community benefits. and would harm the AONB. And it also made the indication that even if we had issues with our land supply, which we do not, the protection of the AONB would override that in any event in this case. We then have an appeal which is against the conditions we attached to a permission granted by committee back in June for a replacement dwelling at Criband at Church Stretton. Whilst it's indicated as allowed, essentially it still achieved what we wanted as the council. The reason why it's deemed allowed is because the inspector made some modifications to the wording of the conditions, but we still have the element of control that we consider was essential there. So the situation is that surface water drainage still need approval, landscaping on the boundaries will need approval, the inspector has kept their conditions relating to retaining walls needing approval, the ecology conditions were kept, the annex use only conditions were kept in relation to the other elements of the scheme, and in terms of modifying permitted development rights, all he is allowing to happen without needing planning permission is the addition of porches and roof alterations that don't amount to additions to the roof. Next, we have an appeal against dismissed was for 4 self-built houses adjacent to the former village school at Canaan. Again, settlement does not include the Harbour cluster, so contrary to core strategy policy CS5, housing policies are deemed to be up to date, and the inspector considered the site had poor accessibility to services. And whilst there was an offer of a unilateral undertaking to transfer land to the use as a village hall car park and children's play space, the inspector gave that very limited weight and was not convinced that there was a receiver who would be able to fund and maintain it in any event. And he gave little, in this particular case, even if he felt there was a deficiency in the council's supply of self-built housing land, the adverse impacts he saw still counted against the grant of permission there. Then we have the Linney at Ludlow. This was the scheme for 8 houses, which was an appeal against non-determination, and that's been dismissed. The inspector said it was conflicted with the strategic aims for our housing policies. He viewed it would be an urban encroachment, and essentially saw the full position of 3 dwellings as not carrying any weight because the impact with 8 would be significantly more in terms of the adverse impact in the area. So also there's a cost application that was dismissed on that particular application. Then we have a proposal for a dwelling at 14 Crunts Brook, Hopton and Wafers. Again, this open countryside location, and even had it been a custom settlement, the site would not have qualified as infill. And again, the argument of self-build was given negligible weight by the inspector because there's no evidence to suggest that Shropshire was falling down in its responsibilities to deliver that affordable housing. And then finally, we had an application related to a porch construction at 2 Whitley Close, Shipton, partly retrospective. Appeal been dismissed. Inspectors considered it was an incongruous addition, dominating the front elevation, disrupting the balance of the pair of properties, and personal circumstances put forward did not outweigh the harm. And yes, that was then refused as being contrary to both the NPPF and development plan policies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Well done. Are there any comments from members of the committee, please? No? Right. Well, we had a meeting scheduled for next week, but I believe that's now been cancelled. So, and I don't know whether there's going to be another meeting before the elections in May.
Yes, Chair, we have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday the 13th of April.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so the next meeting will be Tuesday the 13th of April. I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work and putting into the reports. I'd like to thank Tim Ward for being secretary, and I'd like to thank all those members of the public that have taken part that we can't see. So have a good weekend. and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.